we knew the different patterns of disaster recovery. We tried to explore all of them in previous video. In today's video, in continuation, we're going to talk about ASR, of course. That's the tool for BCDR in Azure. A little bit on general DR. Well, we need to consider a few things when we talk about BCDR. I'm including backup as well, not only disaster recovery. So what we need to keep in mind, we need to make sure to streamline the backup first. If we talk about the entire BCDR solution, that should be our very first step in BCDR. Most of the time, organizations lose data as they didn't have an efficient backup strategy. Take a backup of everything, whether it is your file server, machine image, a DB, anything. Keeping lots of effective backups could increase cost. So make sure to apply a life cycle policy to archive and delete data as per business needs. For example, you can choose to keep a 90-day active backup and after that store that in low-cost archive storage. Why we need that? Because there are compliances such as PCI DSS may require users to store data for 7 years, and in that case you must choose archival data storage to reduce cost. So this is BCDR in entirety, including the backup that we just talked about a glance, because we have covered the DR in great detail in previous video. Now, as they say, any backup and DR as good as it last tested. So what we need to do, we need to come up with a plan of testing. Disaster recovery sites are created for rare disaster recovery events, of course, and are often overlooked. So you need to make sure your DR solution is working as expected in case of an event to achieve higher reliability. Compromising a defined SLA can violate contractual obligations and result in the loss of money and customer trust. And as I said, we will talk about ASR in this video. Why is that so? Because it also provide you an amazing testing capability for DR. Okay, there are various things we need to be aware of ASR. It's a wonderful tool, a cloud native tool provided by Azure. And let's explore ASR a little bit. Well, though we have covered ASR in great detail in the migration playlist and in other playlist in backup and other stuff. If you see in the channel and see different playlist. Well, if we need to understand ASR, well, ASR, we can define ASR as a service that provides BCDR solution for your workloads in Azure, on premises and in other cloud providers. Yes, you heard me correct. It is a native tool for Azure, but you can utilize it for on-prem and other cloud providers as well. ASR has plans that help automate your DR by enabling you to define how machines are failed over and the order in which they are restarted after being successfully failed over. In this way, ASR helps you to automate tasks and further reduce your recovery time objective. You also use the ASR to periodically test failover. That's what I said at the very beginning. Yes, this gives you flexibility to test your failovers without disrupting your production workload. So there are a few things we should be aware of this ASR that I have highlighted here. So it is a very simple BCDR solution, cloud native. As I said, you can utilize your portal and use it for backup. You can use it for VM replications. VM replication, as I said, when I was explaining ASR, it doesn't mean if you're a VM in in only in Azure you can replicate. You can replicate from on-premises, from Hyper-V, VMware, and other cloud providers as well. Now, when we use ASR to replicate the virtual machines, it orchestrate the replication without intercepting application data uh, uh, by following the process. When failover occurs, Azure VMs are created based on the replicated data. So it means it's not creating the VM on the destination side and keeping both in sync, but it's replicating the data and keeping the data in the storage account. And whenever you go and hit failover, it will create the VM out of that data. So data is stored in Azure storage with the resilience that storage account provides. So data resilience. Now RPO, RTO, we have already know what we have covered this in great detail as well in the previous videos. We know what it is, but why in ASR I have mentioned, because ASR keep RTO and RPO within defined organizational limits. How so? Because it has very minimal uh, RTO and RPO. For example, site recovery provides continuous replication for Azure VMs and VMware VMs. So what it means, the RPO could be very minimum, right? And the replication frequency goes as low as 30 seconds for Hyper-V. That's why. So it is a great tool if you want the minimal RPO and RTO. Now, when we talked about RTO and RPO, of course, they are taking the snapshot and sending it to the Azure storage account. And that snapshot is also application consistent. You have the capability to decide your app consistent snapshot as well. And by using app consistent snapshot, you can replicate using recovery points. These snapshot capture disk data, data in memory, and all in process transactions as well. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning, ASR can test, give you the flexibility to test, and that too without disrupting the production application. You can run the disaster recovery flow or test entirely. Now, you can run planned failovers for expected outages with no data loss, run unplanned failovers with minimal data loss, and fail back to a primary site when it's available again. So it gives you a flexible failover. You can fail back. Now, this is something very interesting about the customized plans. We can create recovery plans so that you can customize and sequence the failover and recovery of your multi-tier applications running on multiple VMs. You can group machines together in a recovery plan. You can then optionally add scripts and manual scripts. You can integrate recovery plans with the Azure Automation runbooks. If you want it manual, you can go ahead and update your runbook in the portal manually as well. Now, the integration is something very interesting because it integrates with Azure Automation. You can say it integrates with BCDR technologies. For example, use site recovery to protect the SQL Server backend of your corporate workloads, because of its native support for SQL Server always on, you can manage the failover of availability groups. And if we talk about Azure Automation, of course, uh, you can use Azure Automation Library and download the scripts and integrate application specific scripts with the site recovery. Need not to write down everything from the scratch, because almost all the scripts relevant is available in the library. You can utilize those scripts. So yeah, this is all about ASR and design for disaster recovery part 2, and I think we are good to go. Well, thank you for watching, and you guys have a good day.